Next up, Paul Henry Ramirez. Paul is an American artist known for his signature style of fleshy and pop-inspired abstraction. He has obviously the work in the Charles Engelhard courtyard, celebrating the centennial of the Newark Museum. His work is characterized by abstraction, including biomorphic forms and playful, bold color. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of recent installations by Paul. This is a piece called Seriously Playful from 1995 to 2004. It was an installation at the Stanley and Gerald Rubin Gallery, University of Texas in El Paso in 2004. A second piece called Elevacious Transsensualistic from 2003. And this is an installation at the Tang Teaching Museum in New York. And then the third image is from an installation called Space Addiction from 2002, and this was an installation at the Whitney Museum at Philip Morris in New York. This should give you a sense of what Paul is up to. Okay, next up is Don Voisine. Don is an abstract painter based in Brooklyn, New York. He works with a visual vocabulary of pared down geometric forms that explore the possibilities of visual space within abstraction. He's also the president of the New York-based American Abstract Artists Group that was founded in 1936. And it's important to know that because many of the founding members of that group, such as Joseph Albers, Burgoyne Diller, I made a list here, Alice Trumbull Mason, Charles Greenshaw, Gertrude Green, are all on view in the exhibition Constructive Spirit. Okay. So here are a couple of examples of Don's paintings, recent paintings. It's a piece called Ava from 2006. It's 50 by 40 inches. It's oil on wood. A second painting called Delayed Green, 2007. Third work called Inauguration from 2009, 60 inches square. And lastly, a new work called Your Idea from 2010, 24 by 20 inches. Okay, great. So that should give you a sense of what these artists are working on in the studios. I'm going to begin our conversation tonight by reading you a quote, actually, from the Newark Museum's founder. His name is John Cotton Dana, and I Google searched him, and here's a picture of what he looks like from the Library of Congress. And he wrote a letter to the American artist Max Weber, dated January 14th, 1929, where he talks about the Newark Museum's relationship with abstraction, and I think you'll find this interesting. I have to confess, pray don't think that I'm very old and dull, that I still don't quite understand what it is in drawing and color and design that you pursue so eagerly. But that you and most of your modern associates are sincere, I can have no doubt. And in this world of change, I'm convinced that the institutions in my charge must see and feel and respond to the world's changes, regardless of my own ancient and static ways. So I say there is always hope, that the new is good and helpful, and let us help it to find itself. End quote. And that was from 1929. So it's no surprise that many of the works on view in the Constructive Spirit exhibition, particularly those by American artists, are from the Newark Museum's permanent collection. The museum also mounted some of the very first, some of the earliest, if not the very first, exhibitions of modern artists, such as Max Weber in 1913 and Stuart Davis in 1925. And the museum actually started collecting geometric abstract art in the 1940s. The first work to enter the permanent collection is on view in the show. It's a work by a woman, which I want to point out, Irene Rice Pereira. And so it's no coincidence, therefore, that this exhibition is taking place, was started at the Newark Museum. Abstraction has a long-established ally here, and it's great to have a home. So, now I've asked each of the panelists this evening to begin by reflecting on one of the works in the exhibition, one or two works for a few minutes. And I want them to talk about works that sort of speak to them as artists. The connection could be stylistic, conceptual, personal, philosophical, whatever. Now, they're not going to be giving you sort of dissertation, art historical presentations on each of these pieces. There's plenty of information available in the museum about the works. But I think it's going to be a really interesting framework for our conversation this evening. But before we get started on that, I'm going to say two things that we artists find self-evident. Number one, painting has never died. This needs to be underscored. Forget all the rumors you've heard over the last 20 or 30 years. It never disappeared. It's never attempted a comeback. It's been alive and well this entire time. And number two, abstraction is right now still in its embryonic phase of development. It's literally 100 years old. So relative to the 30,000-year history of the visual arts, I mean, we are really only around for 1% of that time. So that said, I'm going to turn it over first to Paul Henry, who's going to reflect on the work of Raul Loza. Paul.
Thank you, Matthew. I selected Raul Loza's work, Relief Number 30, because I find it really engaging. It's punctuated with lots of references. It's playful, it's sculptural, and it's painterly. I get a sense of weightlessness about it, and really like the hard edge about it, and the chunkiness of it. It kind of reminds me of some of the chunkiness in my paintings in the Blackout exhibition. What I also like about this body of work is that this artist is breaking out from the traditional way of looking painting, which is a square format. And these shapes are angular, and they're reliefs, and they kind of remind me of airplanes and toys, puzzle shapes. And it's sophisticated, but it also looks really fresh and new to me. That's why I selected this artist's work.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next up is Don. Don will be talking about the work of John Mclaughlin.
I really love Mclaughlin's work. I have for a long time. I tried to select someone else's work to talk about for here, because everyone that knows me would say, oh, of course, he's going Mclaughlin. But, I mean, the little Reinhardt next to him is like, I could take that home and it would look great in my apartment. The walls are, I don't have big walls, so that's a perfect size. There's something about Mclaughlin that's always a little bit off from what I sort of knew of geometric abstraction that I saw as I was learning about art. And the work is quite austere but also lyrical. And it's composed on the grid, but there's always something that there's an idiosyncrasy in there that also throws it off a little bit. It's very subtle, but there's just these little shifts that occur. If you saw the painting in the gallery, that blue just really does a lot to like lift that whole painting. There's kind of a similar painting that I saw in an exhibition called Birth of the Cool that traveled around the country a couple years ago that had the bright color up in the left-hand corner, and it was like a chartreuse sort of green, and that thing like really popped. And I can't think of too many other people doing those kinds of things with that kind of color at the time, so 1952. The sense of balance in his work to me is different than what you would see from artists based on the East Coast, because I think he was really influenced a lot by Asian and Japanese and Chinese prints, Asian art, and so there's a very personal sort of stuff going on in the work that it makes it, I think, to me, still looks fresh. And he is beginning to get more recognition, and it's late in coming, but I try to see his work whenever I can.
Great. Thank you, Don.